Welcome to A Chapter a Day. Support our channel and subscribe today. You've been told that winning and losing are opposites. That success is something you achieve, and failure is something you avoid. But what if that's not true? What if the moment you called a loss was actually the beginning of a transformation you didn't yet understand? Here's the truth most people never realize. Your life is not shaped by what happens to you. It is shaped by how you interpret what happens to you. Two people can walk through the exact same experience. One calls it failure, the other calls it feedback. One shrinks, the other evolves. Same moment, different perception, different life. And this is where your power has been hiding the entire time. Because perception is not passive. Perception is creative. It is the lens that assigns meaning, and meaning is what drives every decision, every emotion, every action you take. Which means this: if you can change the meaning, you can change the outcome. In this audiobook, you're not just going to hear ideas. You're going to start noticing patterns. In your thinking, in your reactions, in the quiet assumptions you've been carrying for years. And once you see them, you won't be able to unsee them. By the end of this journey, you will understand how to take any setback, any disappointment, any unexpected turn, and use it as raw material for growth, clarity, and power. Not by forcing positivity, but by mastering perception. Because the people who win consistently aren't the ones who avoid loss. They're the ones who learned how to use it. Chapter 1. Your perception is your reality filter. Take a moment and consider this carefully. Most people move through life believing they are reacting to reality as it is. They believe what they see is what's there. They believe what they feel is caused by the world around them. They believe their circumstances are objective, fixed, and universally experienced the same way by everyone. But that assumption is where everything begins to fracture. Because the truth is far more subtle and far more powerful. You are not experiencing reality directly. You are experiencing your interpretation of it. You are not seeing the world as it is. You are seeing the world as you have learned to see it. And that distinction changes everything. You don't see reality, you see your version of it. Let that settle in. Because once you begin to understand this, you start to notice something unusual. Two people can stand in the exact same moment and walk away with completely different lives. Not because the moment changed, but because the meaning did. Imagine this. Two individuals lose their job on the same day. Same company, same circumstances, same outcome. From the outside, identical. But internally, completely different worlds begin to unfold. The first person immediately thinks, "This is bad. This shouldn't have happened. I've failed. I've lost something important." Their energy contracts. Their thinking narrows. They begin searching for security, trying to replace what was lost as quickly as possible. Not because it's the best move, but because their perception labeled the event as dangerous. Now consider the second person. Same situation, same job loss, but a different internal response emerges. This is unexpected, but maybe this is a shift. Maybe this is space. Maybe this is redirection. Their energy opens. Their thinking expands. They begin asking different questions. What do I actually want now? What did this job teach me? What direction have I been avoiding? Same event. Different perception. Different trajectory. And here's where it becomes even more interesting. Neither person is reacting to the job loss itself. They are reacting to the meaning they assign to it. This is the hidden mechanism most people never see. Events are neutral. Meaning is created. And once meaning is created, behavior follows. You don't see reality, you see your version of it. Now pause for a moment and think about your own life. How many situations have you labeled too quickly? How many moments did you decide were negative without ever questioning that decision? Think about a time when something didn't go your way. At the time, it may have felt like a setback. Something frustrating. Something unfair. Something that disrupted your plans. But looking back now, did it lead to something unexpected? Did it redirect you toward a different path? Did it teach you something you wouldn't have learned otherwise? This is where perception quietly reveals its power. Because what you call a bad moment is often just an incomplete understanding. And here's something even more subtle. The brain does not like uncertainty. It wants to label things quickly. Good, bad, safe, dangerous, success, failure. Not because those labels are always accurate, but because certainty feels comfortable. So the mind rushes. It sees an event and immediately assigns meaning. And that meaning becomes your reality. But here's the question most people never ask. What if the first meaning is wrong? Or at least, incomplete? This is where your power begins. Not in controlling events, but in questioning the meaning you assign to them. Pause and ask, what else could this mean? At first, this question may seem simple, almost too simple, but it disrupts something very deep. It interrupts the automatic pattern of interpretation. It creates space, and in that space, new possibilities appear. Because the moment you realize that meaning is flexible, you stop being trapped by your first reaction. You begin to see options where there were none before. You begin to recognize that what looked like an ending might actually be a transition. What felt like rejection might actually be protection. What seemed like failure might actually be feedback. Now here's where the shift becomes powerful. Most people are trying to change their life by changing their circumstances. They think, if I get better results, I'll feel better. But the truth works in reverse. When you change your perception, your behavior changes. And when your behavior changes, your results follow. This is why two people with the same opportunities can create completely different outcomes. It's not about access. It's about interpretation. It's about what they see and what they believe that means. You don't see reality, you see your version of it. And once you begin to see this pattern, you start noticing it everywhere. In conversations, in decisions, in moments of hesitation, in opportunities you almost ignored because they didn't look familiar. Now pause again and consider this carefully. How many opportunities in your life have you dismissed? Not because they were wrong, but because they didn't match your current perception of what was possible? How many times did something feel uncomfortable, and you interpreted that discomfort as a sign to stop? When in reality, it may have been a sign that you were expanding. This is the subtle trap. Discomfort is often mistaken for danger. Uncertainty is mistaken for risk. And unfamiliarity is mistaken for impossibility. But those interpretations are not facts. They are habits. And habits can be changed. The moment you begin questioning your perception, you begin reclaiming control. Not over everything that happens, but over what it means. And meaning is where your life is shaped. So from this point forward, start noticing. Notice how quickly your mind labels things. Notice the stories you tell yourself about what events mean. Notice the patterns. Because awareness is the first shift. And once you see the pattern, You are no longer unconsciously controlled by it. You don't see reality, you see your version of it. And if your version can change, then your life can change. Not slowly, but immediately, in the way you respond, decide, and move forward. Because the moment meaning shifts, direction shifts. And this is where many people begin to realize something powerful. They were never stuck in their situation. They were stuck in their interpretation of it. And once that changes, everything else begins to follow. But there is a deeper layer to this. Because it's not just that we interpret reality, it's that we interpret it quickly. Too quickly. Before we've even had a chance to understand what something could become. And that brings us to the next realization. The hidden habit that silently shapes your entire life. The habit of labeling things too soon. You've just seen how your perception shapes your reality, how the meaning you assign to events determines your direction. But there's a deeper pattern happening beneath that. Because it's not just what you see. It's how fast you decide what it means. And that speed is where most opportunities are lost. So now, let's go deeper into the mechanism that limits possibility before it even begins. Chapter 2: The Hidden Habit of Labeling Too Soon. There is a moment, so small, so quick, that most people never notice it. It happens between the experience and the emotion. Between what occurs and what you decide it means. And in that brief, almost invisible space, your life begins to take shape. Because the mind does something automatically. Instantly. Without asking for permission. It labels. Good. Bad. Right. Wrong. Success. Failure. And the moment that label is applied, something powerful happens. Possibility narrows. The moment you label something, you limit what it can become. Let that settle for a second. Because this isn't just a habit. It's a mechanism. A protective one. The brain is designed to reduce uncertainty. It wants clarity. It wants definition. It wants to know where things stand. So when something unexpected happens, it doesn't pause. It doesn't explore. It decides. Quickly. And that decision feels like truth. But in reality, it's just your first interpretation. Not your only one. Not your final one. Just the fastest one. And speed is not always accuracy. Now think about how often this happens in your life. Something doesn't go as planned. A conversation feels off. An opportunity disappears. A result doesn't match your expectations. And within seconds, your mind says, "This is bad." And once that label is applied, everything that follows begins to align with it. Your emotions, your thoughts, your behavior. You don't just experience the moment. You experience the meaning you assign to it. And from that point forward, you stop exploring what else it could be. You stop asking better questions. You stop looking deeper. Because as far as your mind is concerned, it already knows. But here's the truth most people never consider. What if your first interpretation is the least useful one? What if the initial label is the one that keeps you stuck? The moment you label something, you limit what it can become. Now let's slow this down and look at a real example. Someone starts a business. They invest time, energy, focus. They take risks. They commit. And after months, maybe years, it doesn't work. The business fails. Now what happens next is not determined by the failure itself. It's determined by the label. If the person says, "This was a mistake. I failed. This proves I'm not good at this," then the experience closes. It becomes something final, something negative, something to move away from. But if that same person says, "This didn't work, but what did it teach me?" everything changes. Now the experience opens. It becomes data, feedback, foundation. And here's what's fascinating. Many successful people have a story like this. A failed attempt that, at the time, looked like a loss, but later became the exact thing that prepared them for something greater. Skills learned, awareness gained, clarity developed, direction refined. But that only happens when the experience is not prematurely labeled. Because once you decide something is bad, you stop looking for how it could be useful. And usefulness is where transformation begins. So the real question is not, was this a good experience or a bad one? The real question is, what can this become? Now pause for a moment and think about something in your own life. Something that didn't go the way you expected. Something you may have labeled as a setback. Ask yourself honestly, did you ever revisit that label? Or did you accept it and move on? Because here's something subtle but powerful. Time does not change the meaning of an event. You do. There are moments in your past that, at one point, felt like losses. But now, looking back, you see them differently. You understand them differently. You even appreciate them. Not because the event changed, but because your perception evolved. Which means this: meaning is not fixed. It is flexible. It can grow. It can expand. But only if you allow it to remain open. And that requires something most people don't practice. Patience with interpretation. The ability to experience something without immediately deciding what it means. To sit with uncertainty just long enough to let deeper understanding emerge. Because when you delay the label, you expand the outcome. The moment you label something, you limit what it can become. Now here's where this becomes even more important. When you label something as negative, your brain begins to protect you from similar experiences in the future. It starts avoiding, hesitating, pulling back. Not because those future opportunities are bad, but because they feel similar to something you already labeled that way. This is how people unknowingly shrink their lives. Not through lack of opportunity, but through accumulated labels. Moments they decided were bad, that later became patterns of avoidance. And over time, those patterns define their direction. But imagine a different approach. Imagine experiencing something unexpected. And instead of reacting immediately, you pause, you observe, you stay curious, and you ask, what else could this mean? At first, it might feel unnatural, even uncomfortable, because the mind wants certainty. It wants to close the loop. But when you resist that urge, something powerful happens. You begin to see layers, nuance, possibility. You start noticing that what seemed like a setback might actually be a setup. That what felt like rejection might actually be redirection. That what looked like failure might actually be preparation. And over time, this changes how you move through life. You become less reactive, more aware, less controlled by circumstance, more guided by interpretation. Because you understand something most people miss. Events don't define your path. The meaning you assign to them does. The moment you label something, you limit what it can become. So from this point forward, start noticing the moment before the label. That brief pause, where you still have a choice. A choice to react automatically, or to respond consciously. Because that moment, small as it seems, is where your power lives. And when you begin to use it, you realize something transformative. You are not just experiencing your life. You are shaping it. Through the meanings you create. Through the interpretations you choose. Through the labels you either apply or release. And this is where the deeper pattern begins to reveal itself. Because it's not just about individual moments. It's about repetition. The same types of experiences, showing up again and again, until something changes, until something is seen differently, until something is understood. Because life has a way of bringing the same lesson back, in different forms, different people, different situations, different timing, but the same core pattern. And if the perception doesn't change, neither does the outcome. You've seen how labeling too quickly can close off possibility, how the meanings you assign to events determine whether they become limitations or stepping stones. But there's a deeper question waiting beneath all of this. Why do certain experiences keep repeating? Why do the same types of challenges show up in different forms throughout your life? Because once you begin to see that pattern, you begin to understand something even more powerful. You're not just reacting to life. You're participating in cycles you may not even be aware of. And that's exactly where we are going next. Chapter 3: The Pattern You Keep Repeating and Why. There's something about life that can feel confusing at first. Almost like certain situations keep finding their way back to you. Different faces, different environments, different circumstances, and yet, strangely familiar outcomes. You tell yourself, this time will be different. And for a while, it is. But then, slowly, almost quietly, the same tension appears, the same frustration, the same result. And you're left wondering, why does this keep happening to me? But here's where the perspective begins to shift. What if it's not happening to you? What if it's happening for your awareness? Because there is a pattern operating beneath your experiences. A pattern that doesn't exist on the surface, but shapes everything beneath it. And here's the key. Life patterns repeat until they are reinterpreted. Let that sink in. Because most people try to change their outcomes without ever recognizing the pattern creating them. They change environments. They change people. They change strategies. But the internal lens stays the same. And so, the pattern continues. Just in a different form. Now pause for a moment and think about your own life. Is there an area where things seem to repeat? It might be subtle. It might not be obvious at first. But if you look closely, you may start to notice it. Relationships that begin with excitement, but slowly turn into the same dynamic. Careers that start with promise, but eventually feel limiting or misaligned. Financial situations that improve, only to return to a familiar level. Different circumstances, same underlying experience. And this is where most people misinterpret what's happening. They focus on the external details. This relationship didn't work because of them. This job didn't work because of the company. This situation didn't work because of timing. And while those factors may play a role, they are rarely the full picture. Because beneath the surface, there is a consistent pattern of perception, a way of interpreting, a way of responding, a way of deciding. And that pattern is what repeats. Not the exact situation, but the way you experience it. This is what we call the pattern recognition trigger. The moment you begin to see that your life is not a series of random events, but a series of connected experiences, guided by a consistent internal lens. And once you see the pattern, you can no longer unsee it. You don't attract what you want, you recreate what you understand. Think about that, because it explains something most people struggle to understand. Why change feels so temporary. Why progress sometimes reverses. Why new beginnings often lead back to familiar endings. It's not because you're stuck. It's because the interpretation hasn't changed. And until it does, the pattern has no reason to stop. Now let's bring this into a real-world scenario. Imagine someone who repeatedly finds themselves in relationships where they feel undervalued. At first, it seems like coincidence. Different people, same result. They might say, "I just keep meeting the wrong people." But if they pause and look deeper, a different question emerges. What am I tolerating that keeps creating this outcome? What am I believing that allows this pattern to continue? Maybe they've internalized the idea that they have to prove their worth. Maybe they've learned to prioritize others over themselves. Maybe they've become comfortable with giving more than they receive. And so, even when the person changes, the pattern remains, because the perception hasn't shifted. Now consider a different scenario. Someone who repeatedly starts new opportunities, but never fully commits. At first, it feels like bad timing, or external obstacles. But over time, a pattern becomes visible. A hesitation, a pullback, a moment where uncertainty appears and action stops. And beneath that, a belief begins to reveal itself. What if I fail? What if I'm not ready? What if this doesn't work? And so the cycle continues. Not because of the opportunity, but because of the interpretation of risk. Life patterns repeat until they are reinterpreted. Now here's the moment where awareness becomes power. Because once you see the pattern, you have a choice. Not to fight the pattern, not to resist it, but to understand it, to observe it without judgment, to recognize it as information. Because the pattern is not there to punish you. It's there to show you something. Something about your assumptions. Something about your beliefs. Something about the lens you've been using to navigate your life. So instead of asking, "Why does this keep happening?" ask a different question. A more useful one. Where in my life is the same lesson wearing different disguises? Pause. And really think about that. Because the answer to that question is the beginning of change. Not surface-level change. Not temporary change. But foundational change. The kind that shifts direction permanently. Because when you reinterpret the pattern no longer needs to repeat. And this is where something powerful happens. You stop feeling like life is working against you. And you start seeing how it's working with you, guiding you, reflecting back what hasn't been fully understood yet. Because every repeated experience is an invitation, an opportunity to see something differently, to choose a new meaning, to respond in a new way. And when you do, the cycle breaks, not by force, but by awareness. Because the moment you change the way you see the pattern, you change the way you move through it. And when your movement changes, your outcomes follow. You don't see reality, you see your version of it. And if your version has been repeating, it's not because you're incapable of change. It's because the interpretation hasn't changed yet. But now, you're beginning to see it. Now you're beginning to recognize it. And that recognition is the first step toward freedom. Because you cannot change what you do not see. But once you see it, you can no longer pretend it isn't there. And that's where transformation begins. Not in doing more. Not in forcing different results. but in understanding the pattern deeply enough that it no longer controls you. And here's the deeper realization waiting beneath all of this. These patterns are not random. They are connected to something even more fundamental, something even more powerful: your identity. Because the patterns you repeat are often the patterns your identity is trying to maintain. And until that identity shifts, the patterns will continue to support it. Which means this: if you want to change the pattern, you have to understand the identity behind it. You've started to see the patterns, how the same lessons can appear in different forms, repeating until they are understood differently. But now we go deeper, because those patterns are not just habits of behavior. They are reflections of something more internal, something your mind is actively trying to protect. So now the question becomes, what is your mind really defending? And why does it resist the very changes that could transform your life? Let's step into that next layer. Chapter 4. The mind protects identity, not potential. There is something happening beneath your decisions, beneath your reactions, beneath even your goals, that most people never fully see. You might believe that your mind is designed to help you grow, to help you succeed, to push you toward your highest potential. But in reality, your mind has a different priority. It is not focused on your potential. It is focused on your identity. And more specifically, it is focused on protecting the version of you that it already knows. Even if that version is limited, even if that version is outdated, even if that version is holding you back. Because to the mind, familiarity feels safe, and anything unfamiliar feels like a risk. This is the core mechanism, the reason why change can feel uncomfortable, even when it's positive. The reason why opportunities can feel intimidating, even when they are aligned. The reason why people hesitate, right at the edge of growth. Because what you're really experiencing in those moments is not fear of failure. It's resistance to becoming someone different. Your biggest limitation isn't failure, it's familiarity. Let that sink in, because it reframes something most people misunderstand. You've been taught to believe that fear is about failing. That hesitation comes from the possibility that things might not work out. But if you look closely, you'll notice something strange. People don't just hesitate before risky situations. They hesitate before unfamiliar ones. Even when those situations could improve their life. Even when there's clear opportunity. Even when success is possible. Why? Because success itself can be unfamiliar. And unfamiliar success challenges identity. Now pause for a moment and think about a time when you had an opportunity in front of you. Something that could have moved your life forward. But instead of acting immediately, you hesitated. You overthought. You delayed. Maybe you told yourself you needed more time, more preparation, more certainty. But beneath all of that, there was something quieter, something harder to notice, a subtle discomfort. Not because the opportunity was wrong, but because it didn't match the version of yourself you were used to being. This is where the mind steps in, not to expand you, but to stabilize you. It begins to generate thoughts, doubts, questions, concerns. What if this doesn't work? What if I'm not ready? What if I lose what I already have? And these thoughts feel logical. They feel protective. They feel real. But their true purpose is not accuracy. It's consistency. The mind is trying to keep your identity intact. Because identity is what the mind knows how to manage. It knows how to operate within familiar boundaries. It knows how to navigate known patterns. But the moment you step outside of that, the moment you begin to act in a way that doesn't match your current identity, the mind experiences that as instability, and it responds by pulling you back into what feels known, back into what feels predictable, back into what feels like you, even if that version of you is no longer where you want to stay. Now here's where this becomes powerful. Because once you understand this mechanism, you stop misinterpreting discomfort. You stop assuming that something feels wrong just because it feels unfamiliar. And instead, you begin to ask a different question, a more accurate one. Notice when something feels uncomfortable, is it wrong or just new? Pause with that, because that question alone can change how you respond to almost everything. Think about it. How many times have you stepped away from something, not because it was truly misaligned, but because it didn't feel natural yet? How many times did you retreat, simply because you hadn't become the person who operates in that space? This is how growth gets interrupted, not by external limitations, but by internal resistance to identity change. Because every new level of life requires a new level of self, a new way of thinking, a new way of deciding, a new way of acting. And until that new identity begins to form, everything about that level will feel slightly uncomfortable, slightly unfamiliar, slightly uncertain. But that discomfort is not a warning sign. It's a transition signal. It's the feeling of expansion, of movement, of becoming. But only if you interpret it that way. Your biggest limitation isn't failure, it's familiarity. Now let's take this deeper, because this doesn't just apply to big opportunities. It applies to small, everyday moments. Moments where you could respond differently, but default to what feels familiar. Maybe it's speaking up instead of staying quiet. Maybe it's setting a boundary instead of overextending. Maybe it's taking action instead of waiting. Each of these moments presents a choice, not just between actions, but between identities. The identity you've been, and the identity you're becoming. And the mind will almost always suggest the familiar option, because it wants to maintain stability. But here's the shift. You don't grow by reinforcing your current identity. You grow by gently challenging it, by stepping just beyond what feels natural, by choosing responses that align with who you want to become, not just who you've been. And at first, that will feel uncomfortable, but over time, that discomfort fades, because what was once unfamiliar becomes familiar. What once felt difficult becomes natural. What once felt like effort becomes identity. And this is how transformation actually happens. Not through sudden, dramatic change, but through repeated moments of choosing differently. Choosing expansion over familiarity. Choosing growth over comfort. Choosing possibility over habit. You don't see reality, you see your version of it. And your version of reality is deeply connected to your identity. Because who you believe you are determines what you notice, what you pursue, what you avoid, what you accept, and what you believe is possible. So if your identity remains the same, your perception remains the same. And if your perception remains the same, your results will follow. But when your identity begins to shift, everything begins to change. You start seeing opportunities you once overlooked. You start responding in ways you once avoided. You start moving differently, thinking differently, deciding differently. Not because the world changed, but because you did. And this is where many people have a realization, a powerful one. They realize that the resistance they've been feeling was never about the situation. It was about the version of themselves that situation required. And once they begin to step into that version, the resistance fades. Not completely, but enough to move forward. And movement is what creates momentum. Momentum that builds confidence. Momentum that builds clarity. Momentum that builds a new identity. And once that identity begins to stabilize, the things that once felt out of reach start to feel natural, expected, even inevitable. But it all begins with one shift, one awareness, one question. Is this wrong, or is this just new? Because the answer to that question determines whether you retreat or expand. And when you begin to choose expansion consistently, you realize something powerful. Your limits were never fixed. They were familiar. And familiarity can be changed. You've begun to understand how the mind protects identity, how it resists unfamiliar experiences to maintain a sense of stability. But now we move into something even more practical. Because once you recognize this resistance, the next step is learning how to use it. How to interpret what's happening, not as a barrier, but as a signal, a reflection, a form of feedback. Because every moment that feels like a setback is actually showing you something specific, something useful, if you're willing to see it. So now, let's shift the lens once more and explore how every loss can become information, how every outcome can become guidance. Chapter 5: Loss as a signal, not a stop sign. There is a moment after something doesn't go the way you expected. A quiet moment. Sometimes it feels heavy. Sometimes it feels frustrating. Sometimes it feels like everything just paused. And in that moment, most people come to a conclusion. This didn't work. I lost. It's over. But what if that conclusion is the very thing that stops the transformation from happening? What if the loss was never the problem? What if the interpretation of the loss is where everything changes? Because here is a shift that redefines everything. Loss is not a stop sign. It is a signal, a reflection, a message. And if you learn how to read it, it becomes one of the most valuable tools you will ever have. Every loss is feedback. Every outcome is information. Let that settle. Because this idea alone can change the way you experience your entire life. Now most people, when they encounter loss, they look outward. They look at the situation, the timing, the other people involved. They try to understand what happened externally. But there is another way to look at it. A deeper way. One that gives you power instead of taking it away. This is what we call the mental mirror technique. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you ask, "What is this showing me about me?" Pause with that, because it's a very different question. And it leads to very different answers. Because every outcome reflects something. A belief, an assumption, a pattern, a way of thinking, a way of deciding. And when you begin to see loss as a mirror, you stop seeing it as something that blocks you, and start seeing it as something that reveals you. Now let's make this real. Imagine an opportunity appears. Something meaningful. Something that could move your life forward. And for a moment, you feel it. Excitement. Possibility. But then, something shifts. A hesitation. A delay. You tell yourself, "I'll think about it. I'll come back to this. I just need more time." And by the time you return, the opportunity is gone. Now in that moment, It's easy to say, I missed out. That wasn't meant for me. I lost the chance. But if you apply the mental mirror technique, a different layer appears. You ask, what did this reflect? And suddenly, the focus shifts. It wasn't about lack of ability. It wasn't about lack of opportunity. It was about hesitation, about timing, about the way uncertainty was interpreted. The loss becomes information. It shows you a pattern, a moment where action could have happened, but didn't. And now, instead of carrying regret, you carry awareness. And awareness can be used. Every loss is feedback. Every outcome is information. Now pause for a moment and think about a loss in your own life. Something that didn't go the way you wanted. Something that felt like a setback. Instead of asking what went wrong externally, ask yourself, what did this show me about how I think, how I act, how I respond? Was there hesitation? Was there doubt? Was there a belief that limited your action? Was there a pattern you've seen before? Because once you begin to see loss this way, it stops being something you avoid and starts becoming something you learn from. And that shift changes everything. Because most people try to avoid loss. They fear it. They resist it. They interpret it as failure. But the people who grow, the people who evolve, the people who consistently move forward, they use loss. They study it. They extract information from it. They ask better questions. They look deeper. And because of that, they improve. Not randomly, not slowly, but intentionally. Because every piece of feedback becomes fuel. Now here's something even more important. When you don't interpret loss correctly, you repeat it. Because the lesson was never integrated. The signal was never understood. So life presents it again. In a different form. Different situation. Same underlying message. And this is where many people feel stuck. Not because they are incapable of progress, but because they are not reading the signal. They are reacting to the surface, instead of understanding the reflection. But once you begin to ask, what is this showing me? You interrupt that cycle. You begin to see patterns sooner. You begin to adjust faster. You begin to respond more intentionally. And over time, the same types of losses stop appearing. Because the lesson has been learned. The pattern has been broken. The perception has changed. You don't see reality, you see your version of it. And when your version begins to include meaning, purpose, feedback, loss no longer feels like an end. It feels like direction. Guidance, a form of communication. Now let's go even deeper. Because this doesn't mean every loss is easy. It doesn't mean every moment feels clear. Some experiences will still feel difficult, unexpected, uncomfortable. But the difference is, you don't stop there. You don't let the first emotion define the final meaning. You stay with it. You explore it. You remain open. And eventually, clarity emerges. Not instantly, but inevitably. Because when you treat every outcome as information, you never leave empty-handed. You always gain something. Insight, awareness, understanding. And those things compound. They build. They shape your decisions moving forward. They refine your perception. And over time, you begin to notice something powerful. The same situations that once stopped you now strengthen you. The same types of moments that once felt like losses now feel like opportunities to learn, to adjust, to grow. Because your relationship with loss has changed. And when that relationship changes, your results change. Because you are no longer avoiding the process. You are engaging with it. Fully. Consciously. Intentionally. Every loss is feedback. Every outcome is information. And once that becomes your default way of seeing, you realize something important. Nothing is wasted. No experience is meaningless. No outcome is without value. Because everything is contributing to your evolution. If you're willing to see it. If you're willing to use it. If you're willing to learn from it. And that willingness is what separates repetition from progress. Because one person experiences loss and retreats. Another experiences loss and reflects. One closes. The other expands. Same event. Different perception. Different future. And this is where the deeper understanding begins to form. Because if loss is not something to avoid, if it's something to interpret, then the real question becomes, why do so many people stay in situations that already feel like a loss? Why do they remain in patterns that don't serve them? Why do they choose familiarity, even when it's painful? Because there is another layer to this. A deeper psychological tendency. One that quietly shapes decisions, without most people even realizing it. You've learned how to see loss differently, how to use it as a signal instead of a stop sign, how to extract meaning instead of retreating from the experience. But now we step into something even more counterintuitive. Because sometimes, the greatest obstacle isn't loss itself. It's the strange comfort people find in what they already know, even when it doesn't serve them. So now we explore a powerful truth about the mind. One that explains why change can feel so difficult, even when it leads to something better. Chapter 6. Why your brain prefers predictable pain. There is a truth about the human mind that feels uncomfortable at first, because it challenges something most people believe about themselves. We like to think that we are always moving toward what is better, that we naturally seek growth, improvement, fulfillment. But if you observe behavior closely, not just your own, but others as well, you begin to notice something surprising. People don't always move toward what is better. They move toward what is familiar, even when that familiarity is painful, even when it limits them, even when they know something more is possible. This is the paradox, the quiet contradiction that shapes so many decisions. And it leads to a powerful realization. The mind would rather repeat a known struggle than face an unknown possibility. Pause with that, because once you truly understand it, you begin to see it everywhere. In choices that don't make sense on the surface. In hesitation that appears without reason. In patterns that continue, even when someone wants change. Now think about this. How many people stay in situations they've outgrown? Not because they don't have options, but because those options feel uncertain. An unfulfilling job. A relationship that no longer aligns. A routine that feels limiting. They know it. They feel it. They even talk about it. But they don't move. Why? Because what they are experiencing is predictable. They understand it. They know what to expect. Even if it's frustrating, even if it's draining, even if it feels like a quiet form of loss, it is still familiar. And familiarity feels safe. Now compare that to something new. A different path. A new opportunity. A decision that could change direction. That possibility might be better. It might lead to growth. It might create something more aligned. But it comes with something the mind resists. Uncertainty. The unknown. And the unknown feels unstable. So the mind does something subtle. It doesn't say, "Stay where you are because it's familiar." Instead, it creates reasons. Logical ones. Convincing ones. You should wait a little longer. This isn't the right time. You need more preparation. Maybe later. And those thoughts feel responsible. They feel smart. They feel protective. But underneath, they serve one purpose: to keep you within the boundaries of what is known. The mind would rather repeat a known struggle than face an unknown possibility. Now let's bring this into a clear example. Imagine someone working in a job that no longer fulfills them. Every day feels the same. The energy is low. The motivation is fading. They know this is not where they want to stay. And then an opportunity appears. A different role. A different direction. Something that aligns more closely with what they actually want. For a moment, they feel it. Excitement. Curiosity. Possibility. But then, something shifts. Doubt. Uncertainty. Questions begin to form. What if it doesn't work? What if I regret leaving? What if I'm not as good as I think? And slowly, the excitement fades. The opportunity becomes distant. And they stay where they are. Not because it's better, but because it's known. Because it feels manageable. Because it doesn't require becoming someone different immediately. And this is where many people misunderstand their own behavior. They think they are avoiding risk. But what they are actually avoiding is identity disruption. Because stepping into something new requires stepping into a new version of yourself. And that version is unfamiliar, unproven, undefined. So the mind pulls you back into the version of yourself it already understands. Even if that version is limited. Even if that version is ready to evolve. Now pause for a moment and reflect honestly. Where in your life are you choosing familiarity over possibility? Where are you staying, not because it's right, but because it's known? Where are you repeating something simply because you understand how it works? Because this is where awareness becomes powerful. The moment you recognize predictable pain for what it is, a pattern, a choice, a comfort zone disguised as limitation. And here's the shift. Predictable pain feels easier in the short term, but it compounds in the long term. It builds frustration, regret, stagnation, while unfamiliar possibility feels uncomfortable in the moment. But it expands over time. It creates growth, opportunity, transformation. So the real question becomes, which discomfort are you choosing? The discomfort of staying the same, or the discomfort of becoming something new? Because one keeps you where you are, and the other moves you forward. The mind would rather repeat a known struggle than face an unknown possibility. Now here's something even more important. When you begin to understand this pattern, you stop judging yourself for hesitation. You stop labeling yourself as unmotivated or indecisive. And instead, you recognize what's actually happening. Your mind is trying to keep things predictable, stable, consistent. And that awareness changes how you respond. Because instead of fighting the resistance, you work with it. You acknowledge it. You see it clearly. And then, you make a conscious choice. Not based on what feels familiar, but based on what aligns with who you want to become. And at first, that choice will feel uncomfortable. It will feel uncertain. It will feel unfamiliar. But that's the signal. That's how you know you're stepping beyond the pattern. That's how you know you're expanding. Because growth rarely feels comfortable at the beginning. But over time, that unfamiliar space becomes familiar. That uncertainty becomes confidence. That hesitation becomes action. And the pattern begins to shift. Because you are no longer choosing based on comfort. You are choosing based on direction. You don't see reality, you see your version of it. And if your version of reality has been shaped by familiarity, then your future will reflect the same patterns. But when you begin to reinterpret discomfort, when you begin to see unfamiliarity as expansion, everything begins to change. You start taking steps you once avoided. You start exploring paths you once dismissed. You start becoming someone you once thought was out of reach. Not because the world changed, but because your perception did. And this is where many people experience a breakthrough. They realize that the thing holding them back was never the situation itself. It was their attachment to what felt known. And once that attachment begins to loosen, movement becomes possible. Real movement. Intentional movement. Movement that leads somewhere new. But there's one more layer to this. Because recognizing the pattern is only the beginning. The next step is learning how to actively change the meaning of what you experience. To take control of interpretation in real time. To shift perception consciously. Because once you can do that, you are no longer reacting to life. You are shaping it. You've seen how the mind clings to familiarity, how it keeps you within patterns that feel predictable, even when they limit your growth. But now we move into something even more powerful. Because once you recognize these patterns, the next step is learning how to break them. Not by force, but by shifting the way you interpret every experience. So now we step into a skill. One that changes everything the moment you begin to use it. The ability to choose meaning deliberately. Chapter 7. The reframing moment that changes everything. There is a moment in every experience. A moment so brief, so subtle, that most people pass through it without even noticing. It is the moment where meaning is assigned. The moment where something happens, and your mind decides what it is. Not what it could be, not what it might become, but what it is right now. And that decision shapes everything that follows. Your emotions, your thoughts, your actions, your direction. But here's the part most people never realize. That moment is not fixed. It is not automatic. It is not something you have to surrender to. It is something you can learn to control, to influence, to reshape. And that is where your power lives. Because the ability to reframe an experience is the ability to change its impact on your life. This is the reframing moment. The point where you stop reacting to meaning and start creating it. And once you understand this, you begin to see something clearly. Events don't define your experience. Interpretation does. Now let's slow this down. Because this is not about pretending everything is positive. It's not about ignoring difficulty. It's not about forcing yourself to feel something that isn't real. Reframing is not denial. It is expansion. It is the willingness to look beyond the first meaning and discover what else might be true. Because every situation contains more than one interpretation, more than one angle, more than one possibility. But most people stop at the first one, the fastest one, the familiar one. And because of that, they limit the outcome before it has a chance to evolve. The moment you label something, you limit what it can become. But when you reframe, you reopen the experience. You give it space to become something different. Now consider a common example. Rejection. Someone says no. An opportunity doesn't work out. A door closes. And the immediate interpretation is, I wasn't good enough. I missed my chance. This is a setback. But what if that's only one version of the truth? What if there's another perspective waiting beneath it? Rejection could also be redirection. It could be a shift towards something more aligned. Something you haven't seen yet. Something that requires a different path. Now think about delay. Something you expected to happen doesn't happen on time. Plans change. Timing shifts. And the first reaction is frustration, impatience, doubt. This should have happened already. But what if delay is preparation? What if something is still forming? What if there is a skill, an awareness, a level of readiness that is still developing? And that delay is creating space for it? Now consider failure. An attempt doesn't work. A result doesn't match your expectation. And the immediate thought is, this didn't work. I failed. But what if failure is data? What if it's information? A precise reflection of what needs to adjust? Because when you look at it that way, failure becomes direction, guidance, clarity. Instead of something that stops you, it becomes something that shapes you. Rejection becomes redirection. Delay becomes preparation. Failure becomes data. Same events, different meaning, different outcome. This is the power of reframing. Now pause for a moment and think about something in your life right now. Something that feels uncertain. Something that feels unresolved. Something that you've already started to interpret in a certain way. Now ask yourself this question. What if this is happening for me, not to me? Let that question sit with you, because it does something important. It interrupts your default interpretation. It creates space. And in that space, new meaning can emerge. Now this doesn't mean everything is easy. It doesn't mean everything makes sense immediately. But it shifts your position. From reacting to exploring. From closing the experience to opening it. And that shift changes your relationship with everything that happens. Because when you begin to reframe consistently, you stop seeing life as something that controls you, and start seeing it as something you participate in, something you shape, something you co-create through interpretation. You don't see reality, you see your version of it. And reframing is how you change that version. Now here's where this becomes a skill. Because reframing is not something you do once. It's something you practice. Something you apply in real time. In small moments. In everyday situations. When something doesn't go as planned. When something feels uncomfortable. When something challenges your expectations. Instead of reacting immediately, you pause. And you ask, what else could this mean? What am I not seeing yet? How could this be useful? And at first, it might feel unfamiliar, because your mind is used to fast conclusions, immediate labels. But over time, that pause becomes natural. That curiosity becomes automatic. And your interpretations begin to shift. Not forced, but chosen. And that changes everything. Because when meaning changes, emotion changes. When emotion changes, behavior changes. And when behavior changes, results follow. This is how you turn moments around. Not by controlling the external world, but by mastering the internal response. And once you begin to do this consistently, you notice something powerful. The same types of situations that once felt limiting now feel workable, flexible, full of possibility. Because you are no longer locked into one interpretation. You are creating meaning consciously. And this is where people begin to experience a kind of freedom. Not because life becomes perfect, but because nothing is fixed anymore. Everything becomes usable. Everything becomes part of the process. Everything becomes something you can work with. Every loss is feedback. Every outcome is information. And reframing is how you access that information. Now here's the deeper realization. When you change the meaning of an experience, you don't just change that moment. You change the identity connected to it. Because the way you interpret events shapes the way you see yourself. If you interpret something as failure, you begin to see yourself as someone who failed. If you interpret something as feedback, you begin to see yourself as someone who is learning. And that identity shift changes how you move forward. It changes what you attempt, what you believe is possible, what you expect from yourself. And over time, that becomes your new baseline. A new way of thinking, a new way of seeing, a new way of being. But this leads to something even more powerful. Because once you begin to reframe consistently, you don't just recover from setbacks. You start using them strategically, intentionally, as building blocks, as advantages, as fuel. And that is where transformation becomes visible. Because now, you are not just adapting to life. You are shaping it. Through perception, through meaning, through choice. And that brings us to the next level of this journey. Because once you can reframe your experiences, the next step is learning how to turn them into something even more powerful. Not just neutral, not just manageable, but advantageous. Something that moves you forward deliberately. You've learned how to shift meaning, how to reframe experiences in a way that opens possibility instead of closing it. But now we go one step further. Because understanding is powerful, but application is what creates transformation. So now the question becomes, how do you take everything you've experienced, every setback, every delay, every challenge, and turn it into something that actually works for you? Something that gives you an edge? Something that accelerates your growth? That's what we step into next. Chapter 8: Turning Setbacks into Strategic Advantages. At this point, something has already begun to change. You're no longer seeing experiences the same way. You're no longer reacting as quickly or as automatically. There's a pause now. A space. A moment where you begin to recognize, there is more here than I first thought. And that awareness is where transformation begins. But now we take the next step. Because understanding something is powerful. But using it, that's where your life begins to shift in a visible, tangible way. Because it's one thing to say, this experience taught me something. It's another thing entirely to take that lesson and turn it into an advantage. To use it, to apply it, to build with it. And that is where most people stop short. They reflect, but they don't convert. They understand, but they don't implement. They recognize the lesson, but they leave it behind, instead of carrying it forward. But what if every setback you've experienced was actually a resource? Something you could extract from, something you could use, something that could give you an edge, if you knew how to look at it? This is where the shift becomes practical. Because now we are not just reframing experience. We are transforming it, turning it into something that actively works for you. And it begins with a simple but powerful realization. Nothing you've been through is wasted. Not the delays, Not the failures. Not the mistakes. Not the moments where things didn't go your way. Every one of those experiences contains something valuable, something you can carry forward, if you choose to see it. Every loss is feedback. Every outcome is information. But now we go deeper, because information alone is not enough. You have to extract it. You have to define it. You have to apply it. So let's slow this down and walk through what this actually looks like. Think about a difficult experience from your past. Something that challenged you. Something that stretched you. Something that didn't go the way you expected. At the time, it may have felt like a loss. But now, ask yourself a different question. What did this give me? Not what did it take. Not what did it cost. But what did it give? Because if you look closely, there is always something there. Skills. You learned how to navigate something you didn't understand before. Resilience. You developed the ability to keep going, even when things were uncertain. Clarity. You discovered what you don't want, which brings you closer to what you do want. Awareness. You saw a pattern, a belief, a behavior that you hadn't noticed before. Each of these is an asset. Something you didn't have before that experience. Something that now exists within you. Something that can be used moving forward. But here's where it becomes powerful. Most people recognize these things, but they don't integrate them. They don't consciously carry them into their next decision, their next action, their next opportunity. And because of that, they repeat the same patterns. But when you begin to extract and apply, everything changes. Because now, your past is not something behind you. It becomes something within you. Something that informs your decisions. Something that strengthens your direction. Something that sharpens your awareness. And over time, that compounds. It builds. It creates an advantage. Not because you avoided difficulty, but because you used it. Now here's where the identity shift begins. Because as long as you see yourself as someone who lost, you carry that limitation forward. It becomes part of your story, part of your identity. But when you shift the way you see that experience, you shift the way you see yourself. You are not the person who lost, you are the person who learned. Pause with that, because it changes everything. It changes how you interpret your past. It changes how you approach your future. It changes how you define yourself in the present moment. Because now, you are not defined by the outcome. You are defined by the growth, the awareness, the evolution. And that identity moves differently. It takes action differently. It responds differently. Because it is no longer trying to avoid loss. It is using experience, all of it, as material, as fuel, as leverage. Now think about this. Two people go through the same challenge. One carries the memory of failure. The other carries the lesson. One becomes more cautious. The other becomes more capable. Same experience. Different interpretation. Different identity. Different future. And this is where the advantage begins to show. Because when you consistently extract value from your experiences, you accelerate your growth. You shorten your learning curve. You make better decisions, faster. Not because you know everything, but because you're using everything. You don't see reality, you see your version of it. And when your version includes opportunity within difficulty, value within challenge, growth within discomfort, you begin to operate at a different level. Now here's something even more powerful. When you start seeing your past this way, you stop wishing things had been different. You stop regretting. You stop replaying moments, wishing you had chosen differently. Because you understand something deeper. Everything contributed. Everything added something. Everything played a role in shaping who you are now. And that creates a sense of alignment. A sense of clarity. A sense of direction. Because you are no longer resisting your past. You are using it. And that changes how you move forward. You become more decisive, more confident, more intentional, because you trust your ability to extract value from whatever happens next. And that trust is what creates momentum, because now you are not waiting for perfect conditions. You are not trying to avoid mistakes. You are not trying to control every outcome. You are moving, taking action, knowing that whatever happens can be used, can be learned from, can be turned into something meaningful. You are not the person who lost, you are the person who learned. And once that becomes your identity, loss loses its power, not because it disappears, but because it transforms. It becomes part of your process, part of your strategy, part of your growth. And that is where real confidence comes from. Not from always winning, but from knowing that nothing is wasted. That every experience contributes. That every outcome has value. If you're willing to see it. If you're willing to use it. If you're willing to learn from it. And when you begin to live this way, you realize something powerful. You are no longer reacting to life. You are building with it, shaping it, using every piece of it as part of your path forward. And that is where transformation becomes visible. Not just in how you think, but in how you act, how you decide, how you move. Because now, everything works for you. Not just the wins, but the losses as well. And that creates a different kind of person. A different kind of mindset. A different kind of identity. One that is not easily shaken. One that is not easily discouraged. One that continues to move, regardless of outcome. Because it understands something most people don't. There is always something to gain. Always something to use. Always something to build with. And that understanding changes everything. But this leads to the next level. Because once you begin to turn setbacks into advantages, the next step is becoming the kind of person who naturally operates this way, consistently, automatically, as part of who you are. Not something you try to do, but something you are. You've learned how to take your experiences and turn them into assets, how to extract value, how to build from what once felt like loss. But now we go deeper. Because transformation is not just about what you do. It's about who you become. So now the question shifts. What does it mean to become someone who wins differently? Someone who is not defined by outcomes, but by interpretation and identity? Let's step into that next level. Chapter 9. Becoming the person who wins differently. By this point in your journey, something subtle has already started to shift. You've begun to notice patterns. You've started to reframe experiences. You've learned how to take setbacks and turn them into fuel. But now, we move into the space where transformation becomes permanent, where it moves beyond technique and enters identity. Because here is the truth most people overlook. Winners are not defined by the outcomes they achieve. They are defined by the interpretations they hold. They are defined by the version of themselves they reinforce, consistently, over time. Let me explain this with something simple. Imagine two people. Both fail repeatedly. Both encounter loss, disappointment, and frustration. Both feel the sting of rejection, the heaviness of setbacks. But here's the difference. The first person sees failure as proof that they are not capable. They see rejection as a signal that the world is against them. They interpret outcomes as judgments on their worth. And because that becomes their identity, every new opportunity feels risky. Every new challenge feels threatening. They stay small because that is who they believe they are. The second person, someone who has learned the reframing practice, sees failure differently. Failure becomes feedback. Setbacks are signals. Rejection is redirection. They ask the question, what can I learn here? And with every interpretation, their identity shifts. They are no longer the person who loses. They are the person who learns. They are the person who adapts. They are the person who moves forward, no matter the outcome. And here's the critical point. Your results will always follow the identity you reinforce. It doesn't matter how much you know. It doesn't matter how many strategies you memorize. It doesn't matter how perfect your plan is. If the identity inside your mind is resistant, fearful, or fixed, your actions and your results will reflect that. This is why so many people work hard, fail, and repeat the same cycles over and over again. They never shifted the internal framework. They never became the person who sees opportunity where others see limitation. They never became the person who turns loss into leverage. And that is where the real power of identity lies. When you change how you see yourself, you change everything. Your choices, your persistence, your courage, your clarity. And it starts with the small, consistent decisions. The choice to notice when you are interpreting reality in a limiting way. The choice to pause and ask, what else could this mean? The choice to extract value from every setback. The choice to step into the version of yourself that is capable, resilient, and expansive. Because identity is not a one-time change. It is a process. It is a loop. The more you reinforce it, the stronger it becomes. And over time, it becomes automatic. You no longer need to push. You no longer need to remind yourself. You simply operate from this version of yourself. And when you operate from that version, you win differently. You don't need every outcome to go your way. Because you have learned how to turn every outcome into opportunity. You have learned how to extract growth from every experience. You have learned how to become someone who moves forward, regardless of circumstance. And that is the ultimate difference. Not everyone can see it. Not everyone can live it. But once you begin to reinforce this identity, you see the world in a fundamentally new way. Opportunities that once felt impossible now feel possible. Failures that once felt like the end now feel like steps forward. Challenges that once felt crushing now feel like guidance. And here is the truth that brings this full circle. Everything you've learned in this audiobook, reframing, extracting value from setbacks, observing patterns, has led to this point. The point where you are no longer defined by what happens to you, but by the person you choose to be in response. Your results will always follow the identity you reinforce. And that identity is yours to create. You've learned to perceive differently, to reframe, to convert setbacks into growth, and to reinforce a powerful identity. Now it's time to bring it all together. Because the final step is not just about becoming someone who wins differently. It's about stepping into life fully, intentionally, and with a perspective that allows every choice, every experience, every moment to expand who you are. Chapter 10. Designing a life that cannot be broken by loss. Now, as we arrive at the final chapter of this journey, take a moment and breathe. Allow yourself to reflect on everything that has brought you here. The realizations, the shifts, the pauses, the reframes, all of it. And understand something profound. The work you've done up until now is not just about surviving challenges, it is about becoming unshakable. Because life is not measured by the absence of loss. It is measured by your ability to navigate loss, to reinterpret it, to use it, and to continue moving forward with clarity, with purpose, with strength. Imagine a life where nothing that happens to you, no rejection, no delay, no failure, can destabilize your mind. A life where outcomes are neutral until you assign meaning. A life where your internal compass is stronger than any external circumstance. This is the life of someone who has mastered perception. And mastering perception is not about controlling events. It is about controlling interpretation. It is about seeing the world and yourself through a lens that is flexible, adaptive, and anchored in your identity rather than in circumstance. When perception becomes flexible, when meaning is chosen consciously, something extraordinary happens. Events lose their power to shake you. Failures become lessons. Rejection becomes redirection. Delays become preparation. And opportunities, even the ones you didn't plan for, become usable. Think about that for a moment. What if nothing could defeat your perception? Not a sudden loss, not an unexpected failure, not a moment of discomfort. What would that life look like? You would be unstoppable. You would move through the world guided by awareness, insight, and intentionality. You would not react. You would respond. You would create instead of merely endure. And this is the final step, the culmination of everything we've discussed in this audiobook. It is the realization that life's events do not define you. Your identity, your perception, your interpretation defines you. And when you operate from that place consistently, you design a life that cannot be broken by loss. Now, take a moment to visualize your future. See yourself moving through challenges with calm, with clarity, with unwavering presence. See yourself extracting meaning from every experience, building from every setback, strengthening your identity with every choice. See yourself as someone who has learned to live in a state of unshakable resilience, where nothing outside of you can diminish your power. And understand this final truth. When nothing can defeat your perception, everything becomes usable. Every challenge, every delay, every setback becomes material for growth. Every moment becomes an opportunity. Every experience becomes a building block. And this is freedom. This is unshakable life. This is the power that comes from mastering your mind, mastering your perception, and intentionally shaping your identity. You are no longer at the mercy of life's events. You are now the co-creator of your experience. And that, more than anything, is the ultimate mastery: to live deliberately, to interpret consciously, and to use everything life offers as fuel for expansion. So now I leave you with this: step into life fully. Carry these truths with you. Apply them consistently. Notice your interpretations. Reframe what needs to be reframed. Extract value from every setback. And reinforce the identity that allows you to turn every loss into a lesson, every delay into preparation, and every challenge into advantage. Because the person you are becoming, the life you are designing, cannot be broken. And the world, in its entirety, is now yours to use. This is your call to action. Start today. Start in this moment. And live a life that is unshakable, unstoppable, and fully your own. You are not defined by what happens to you. You are defined by how you choose to perceive it. And with that, the journey begins, not just in words, but in action. In closing, at some point, something shifts. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" And you start asking a different question. What can I do with this? And that question changes everything. Because the moment you realize that meaning is not fixed, you begin to see possibilities where you once saw problems. You begin to recognize that every moment, every delay, every rejection, every unexpected turn, was never designed to stop you. It was designed to shape you, to refine your thinking, to expand your awareness, to challenge the identity you had outgrown, but were still holding on to. And this is where most people miss the opportunity. They try to change their circumstances, without ever changing the lens through which they see them. But you're not going to do that anymore. Because now you understand something powerful. The same event that breaks one person builds another. The difference is not the event. The difference is perception. So from this point forward, you have a choice. Every time something doesn't go your way, every time something feels like a setback, you can react the old way, or you can pause and ask, what else could this mean? What is this trying to teach me? How can I use this? Because the moment you ask better questions, you create better outcomes. And here's your challenge. For the next 7 days, do not label anything in your life as negative. Not immediately, not automatically. Instead, observe it, question it, reframe it, train your mind to see differently. Because when you change the way you see things, you don't just change your experience, you change your direction. And eventually, you change your entire life. This is where it begins.